Hi everybody, and welcome to Parenthood as a Hero's Journey. I'm Ellie Taylor, Relationship Counsellor, Parenthood Researcher and author of the book Becoming Us. And I am so excited to be able to share my 15 years of research, clinical work and personal experience with you today. So a really, really warm welcome to each and every one of you. Now, you may be expecting while you're listening to this, and so I'm super excited to get this information to you while you're still preparing for your family or thinking thinking ahead for your family. You may have a baby or a little one, and you may already be, on the first steps in your journey, or even, a few years into the journey. You may even be expecting again your second or your third child, and probably experiencing that the journey is slightly different second or third time around. You might have a partner, you might have a husband, you might be a sole parent. The journey will be different for each of you depending on where you're at right now. I hope that my work will give you some new perspective on the journey so far for you, and some inspiration about what the next steps might be. I hope that you come away with some understanding, a better appreciation for yourself and your partner and what you've been through together, and potentially even some new opportunities for healing or for bonding with your partner. So welcome, let's get started. We tend to send parents off on the parenthood journey with a bon voyage card. We maybe have a baby shower and buy some nice things and have a bit of a party. But parenthood for most parents is not a walk in the park. It's not an easy thing to be embarking on because it's such a big thing for parents. And I actually think in many ways we kind of, I guess, set parents up for failure. We just don't prepare parents for parenthood. And we spoke about some of this in our introductory call, the ways that parents are unprepared for parenthood and the ways that that can impact them as individuals and as a couple. I certainly thought that I was well prepared for parenthood. I did prenatal yoga. I read everything that I could get my hands on. My husband and I paid to do private antenatal classes. We thought that because we'd done all that we could do, we'd already learnt everything that we needed to know, or that there was nothing else that we needed to know, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. And so that was the beginning of me researching the transition into parenthood. I became a relationship counsellor. At the same time, I became a mother. And so I was always looking at parenthood through a relationship lens, and always really aware of the changes and challenges that I found in parenthood, and how those changes and challenges were impacting on me in terms of my relationship with myself, my relationship with other people close to me, my own parents, friends, colleagues, family, and extended family, and how changes in those relationships, the relationships that were close to me, also impacted on my relationship with my husband. And then, of course, the changes that we went through in terms of our relationship with each other. And so I became very curious about the transition into parenthood, and, why weren't parents better prepared for it? What happens to us and to our close relationships when we become parents? And more importantly, what can we do to prepare parents for the journey that they're about to embark on? And over the 15 years that I was researching the transition, it really consolidated for me that there is so much we can do to prepare, guide and support parents for the parenthood adventure. And I'm very committed to equipping parents with what they need for each step of the way. So let's embark on it, shall we? Are you ready? Let's take our first step. So the first stage I found in the parenthood journey was pre-baby preparation, and most parents actually don't prepare much for parenthood. In Australia, for example, only around 30% of couples do the hospital antenatal classes, which is compared to about 60 or 70% in the UK. I'd be curious to know what the statistic is in the United States, actually. But even though the classes exist, a lot of couples don't take advantage of them. Some couples do pre-baby preparation through, say, yoga teachers or private antenatal classes. But even when they do, there's a common complaint, I guess, that I hear, that we spent 6 weeks learning how to push out a baby, and in the end it was out of our hands, and we learnt zero about what happens when you get the baby home, and that's when the fun really starts, and that's what we really needed preparation for. And I was talking to a midwife colleague of mine, and she'd done some research into antenatal classes, and she was saying that while parents were thirsty for after the baby comes information, that midwives and childbirth educators felt they didn't have the time to deliver that information, or they didn't have the confidence to deliver it. So we really do have this huge information gap out there that I'm hoping to fill as much as possible. It's a big job. So my stage one then is to pack carefully. I think it's really important for couples to educate themselves about the birth process, about how they can work with the birth process, and what the side trips might be if the birth doesn't go according to plan. A lot of couples these days do a birth plan. I think it's really important to also do a postpartum plan, because the postpartum period is really formative and foundational for a family. And I actually have a free postpartum called a nest building plan on my website at ellietaylor.com, so take advantage of that. We know from research now that stress during pregnancy can be related to postnatal or postpartum depression in both mothers and fathers afterwards. So it's really important, as much as possible, for expecting couples to reduce their stress during pregnancy. And I encourage couples to do family-friendly stress relief that they can continue after the baby comes. So, dad disappearing for a weekend to go surfing, or spending whole days playing golf, is not going to work after the baby comes, when he needs to be on call and close to home. So think now what you can sustain later on. Going for a daily walk is perfect, because you can just put the baby in the sling or in a pram and go. I encourage couples to organise their finances and work leave beforehand, because that takes a lot of pressure off afterwards. Most couples underestimate the amount of time that they'll want at home after the baby's born, so take as much as you can if you're thinking ahead at that stage now. I tell couples to start practicing simple, clear and supportive communication now, because the postpartum period is a time of a great deal of adjustment, and communicating simply, clearly and supportively is the easiest way to avoid miscommunication, misunderstandings, and potentially conflict that can be common in the postpartum period, thanks to sleep deprivation and steep learning curves. So the earlier couples start practicing that, the better. So if you even preconception now, or you're thinking about adopting, or you're just starting to think about having a family, never too soon to start practicing this style of communication. It can feel awkward for a lot of couples. It's can be a bit uncomfortable, but in the post-baby period, a lot of couples find it a great relief to be able to talk to each other in that way. Also, if you've got any concerns, if you're expecting and you've got any concerns, if you're feeling anxious about anything, or you're worried about how you're going to cope in the postpartum period or whatever, please seek help early. There's a whole perinatal nest out there. There's a whole bunch of professionals who are just waiting to help you. It used to take a village. It still takes a village. So take advantage of the help out there. So If you are a parent now, I'd like you to take the opportunity to reflect on how prepared you may have been for your parenthood journey, and just take a moment to think about that. The birth experience can have an impact on a couple's relationship. A traumatic birth can be quite devastating for both mum and her partner, and it can take them a lot longer to find their parenthood feet because of it. So again, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to reflect on your birth experience and what it was like for you and what it might have been like for your partner. You might want to ask them about that at some stage if you think it might be an issue for them. And then think about, is there possibly some lingering effects of a negative birth experience? Just as an example, I've worked with a few couples where, he has wanted a large family, 4 or 5 kids, but her birth experience was so traumatic that she just can't go there again. She just doesn't want to have any more children because she's afraid. I'm happy to say that with the couples that I did work with on this, they did go on to have more children. So again, whatever lingering effects there might be, there is plenty of support out there. So seek it out. You don't want to be stuck because of a negative birth experience, and you don't want that for your partner and for your potentially bigger family too. So let's go on to stage 2. So, stage 2 is postpartum adjustment. Most couples I found when I was working as a counsellor really underestimate or don't even anticipate the need for a postpartum period, not just to recover from the birth. That's the least we want to happen. It's also to adjust, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and relationally, and even for some parents spiritually, to what becoming a family means for them and the life that they're building together. I see so many couples trying to, rush back to normal, to kind of cram a new baby into a probably already overcrowded life, and it just puts so much pressure on them. I think it's really helpful, beneficial for us to carve out that space for us. Like I say to couples, how after the stress of planning the wedding and, it was such a big day, you really needed to just get away and have a honeymoon. Well, think of this as a baby moon. You might never have this time again, certainly not with the first anyway. So my step 2 then is to build your nest. And I tell couples to, as much as possible, to create a buffer from outside stresses. You want your home to be a nest. You want it to be a cocoon. It's your safe place. So, turn off the news. It's depressing. Turn off the phones and the laptops. It's distracting. Make eye contact. The news is you had a baby. The eyes, your baby's eyes and each other's eyes is what you want to be paying attention to at this lovely time. Take shortcuts wherever possible. Freeze meals beforehand. Organise for takeouts. Organise for a cleaner. Make it as much as possible about just bonding and enjoying the new space that you're creating. Some visitors can be stress relievers and some visitors can be stress bringers. The trick is to know who is who. If you're going to have early visitors, make sure that they're helpers too. A visitor is somebody who a helper is somebody who brings food and doesn't stay long enough, and a visitor is somebody who eats your food and stays too long. So that's how I distinguish them. Reach out for help. As I said, there's plenty of it out there. There are people that are absolutely busting to help a new family, particularly if they get to hold the baby for a little while as well. So, you weren't meant to do it alone, and you don't need to. If you make the postpartum plan, you've actually got a page where you can write who can help you and what they can help you with. So if you're not there yet, I encourage you to do that. And aim to be learners, not experts. I know that this was true for me. I was a professional woman in my, previous life, in my before children life. I was capable, I had agency, I was confident. I just assumed I would be a capable, confident mother and that my skills would be transferable into motherhood. Well, some of them were, and some of it was also instinctive, but some of it was also a steep learning curve, and that's one of the big bits that I was unprepared for. I put a lot of pressure on myself to get it right and to do it perfectly and to be really good at it. And we now know from research that this tendency for perfection is actually related to and can cause or be one of the contributing factors to postnatal or postpartum depression, which I ended up getting. So take the pressure off. Be learners, not experts. Your baby you'll become an expert, and then your baby will grow and change and you'll be a learner all over again. And you know what? I have teenagers now and I'm still learning, and I know that I always will be. So take the pressure off from the start, and take the pressure off yourself. So again, I'll invite you to think about what your postpartum experience was like. Did you rush to get back to normal? Did you carve out that space for yourselves? And what effect do you think it might have had on you, the way that you approached it, and on your partner? Stress during the postpartum period can have a big impact on a couple's relationship because you're both quite sensitive and going through a lot of change. There might be some healing to be done between you from those early days or weeks. You might want to revisit it and talk about what it was like for you, so that you get an understanding of the impact that it may have had. And if you're not there yet, check out your nest building plan. There's one on ellietaylor.com. Stage 3 is unmet expectations. This is huge for most of the couples that I speak with. In fact, it's pretty much universal. I don't think I've met a parent that said that becoming a parent was exactly like they thought it would be. 30% of women in a study done by Beyond Blue here in Australia said that unrealistic expectations contributed to their postpartum depression. The higher our expectations of something, the potential there is for a greater fall. And our culture, I think, does a really lousy job of setting parents up with realistic expectations of parenthood. If you look at our movies, there was that one a few years ago, What to Expect. It was funny, but it was very vanilla. It really whitewashed, any of the potential issues. It whitewashed birth. It didn't give a great example of what, birth was really like in most of the scenarios. Some of us still grew up with Jerry Maguire, you complete me, that whole romantic notion that somebody else completes us. Well, if my partner completes me, well, what happens if I have a baby and the baby now completes me? Well, my partner loses out. So there's these kind of unhealthy romantic notions that we tend to go into our relationships and then into parenthood with, that can really sort of set us up for struggles, I think. I think our culture really has lost that whole ability to prepare parents for parenthood. And so step 3 is to pack healthy expectations. And I tell couples that don't aim to get back to normal. Normal's going to change for you. It's up to you to work together to work out what the new normal is for your family, what's right for you. And that might be different from what it was in your own families growing up. It might be different from your neighbours or from your friends. But it's the two of you working together to create it. That is how it comes about in ways that work for both of you. I let parents know that breastfeeding and settling a baby can be challenging at first. Breastfeeding has to be learnt by both mum and baby, and support from a partner is really helpful when you're learning in anything. It can be stressful when your baby's crying and you don't know why they're upset and why they're crying and how to soothe them. And, couples will often get into conflict in the middle of the night because the baby's crying and neither of them know what to do. It's quite a stressful thing to go through. So expect that. And when you expect it, you know that it's normal, and you know that, your neighbours and your friends are all arguing at 3 o'clock in the morning because they've got a baby that they can't settle to. We all go through it. The more realistic our expectations are of parenthood, the better we cope afterwards, because we anticipate what the challenges might be and we might gather some support or some information in order to cope with them. Expectations can very easily become assumptions. We all tend to expect that our expectations are realistic and likely to be in line with reality, but as I said, it's often not the case. So a really good idea to check your expectations out with other new mothers or fathers and with your partner before it becomes an assumption. That takes a lot of pressure off as well. So, what were your expectations of parenthood? How did you picture it? What did you think it would be like? And where did your expectations come from? I invite you also to think about how realistic your expectations were now that you may be in the after. How realistic were they beforehand? Often when our expectations are unmet, we look for the closest person to blame. We don't think to examine our expectations. Is it possible that somebody was blamed unfairly? And might you need to revisit it with them? Did you blame yourself? And might you need to rethink that too? Take the pressure off both of you. Stage 4 is family needs. When you take an aeroplane flight somewhere and they do the safety presentation at the beginning, they talk about where the exits in the plane are, they talk about if there's any changes in cabin pressure because of turbulence, an oxygen mask will drop down from the ceiling and you need to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can attend to, say, a child sitting next to you. Well, stage 4 is like that. If you have children now, you will know that they come with a lot of changes, and that change can be stressful. Even good changes can be stressful. Changing jobs, buying a house, even going on holiday. I remember one of the first holidays I took with my husband, we fought a lot because it was our first trip overseas. It was a big deal for us and it was exciting, but it was also stressful. And so stress often translates into tension, which translates into conflict. So even good changes can be stressful. So your family is going to go through multiple changes over the next few years and decades. Stage 4 is where you lay down some solid foundations, some good habits to cope with all the stresses and changes and challenges that might come down the track so that you're prepared for them. And so I call stage 4, or step 4, Set Up Basecamp. It's where you lay down, bed down some really healthy habits that can help you cope with whatever life will throw at you. And, hopefully it won't be bad, but it might. So put the oxygen mask on. Base camp is keep things simple. Eat well, eat good nutritious food, hydrate with, good quality liquids, not, diet sodas, that sort of thing. Diet sodas actually contain aspartame, which is a depressant, so not good, particularly in the postpartum period. Rest as much as possible, particularly if you're breastfeeding. There's a particular ingredient that's needed in breast milk production that depletes mid-afternoon, and you literally need to rest to increase supply. So if you're breastfeeding, you definitely need to rest, and even if you're not, you're working just as hard. Sleep when you can, even if it means having somebody over to watch the baby for a couple of hours a day. Include your partner in everything that's going on. They are establishing their own relationship with your child, and that's good for everybody. They are not just a helper, they're not just a babysitter, they are a dad or a same-sex partner, but they are a parent as well, and that comes with its own responsibilities and joys and everything else. And you want them to experience it as much as possible, because the more you can both experience the same things, the more understanding you will have for each other, the more empathy you'll have for each other, the more you'll be able to support each other. So yeah, include them with everything that's going on. Keep up the stress relief. That's really important for parents. Super, super important for parents. And take time out, both as individuals and as a couple, regularly. Keep up the simple communication skills that hopefully, if I've caught you early enough, you'll have some time to practice, and remember to support each other. Basecamp is where you're really going to consolidate and set yourselves up for a fantastic start. So if you're there already, or if you've gone beyond this step and you probably didn't know about it, you probably didn't know that it existed, I synthesized the research and I found that couples tended to start having issues around 3 to 6 months after their baby was born. So this is kind of the step where you put the oxygen mask on yourself, and you support your partner in putting their oxygen mask on, so that you can cope with those normal changes and challenges that start to creep in at about the 3 to 6 month mark. So thinking back, what difference for you might it have made if you knew how important it was to look after yourself and each other in your first few months as a family? Stage 5 is increased emotionality. What most couples don't realise is that they are both biologically primed to be sensitive to their baby. Oxytocin levels are higher, testosterone even in fathers is lower. They're both primed to observe their baby, to read their baby's emotional cues so that they can anticipate how to respond to their baby's needs. So what that means is that they're also going to be more sensitive to each other. You're going to be more sensitive to your partner, and they are going to be more sensitive to you. And so when you're not aware of that, that can cause issues. You can take things more personally, you can be more oversensitive, you can be more emotional than normal, and that can freak people out. So step 5 is to embrace your emotions, to know that you're more sensitive for a reason, and to work with that sensitivity rather than against it. If you keep up the Basecamp stuff, you're less likely to be emotionally stretched if you're eating well, resting, and getting exercise. Exercise particularly is a natural antidepressant, anti-anxiety. It is so, so, so important that if parents haven't exercised regularly before baby comes, that they start afterwards, because it really does help us to cope with all of the stages of parenthood. Know that you're primed to be sensitive to your baby, and that's a really good and important thing. It means you're going to be more sensitive to each other, so work with that. Learn how to be supportive of your partner emotionally. I give expecting and new parents emotion coaching, and what I tell them is that most of us were raised to deny, minimize, ignore, or play down our emotions. Particularly, my father's British. It was stiff upper lip, children are to be seen and not heard sort of thing. So I had to really learn to become familiar with my emotions, and then to become comfortable with my emotions, and then how to express my emotions appropriately. But we have emotions for a reason. They are signals, and they guide us to a need underneath. For example, if I'm feeling lonely, that's a signal that I need to reach out to somebody. It might be that I need to reach out to my partner for a hug, or I need to reach out to my best girlfriend, who has a new baby, because I'm having a tough day. When I can get that underlying need met, I feel good again. I feel back to being normal. If I continually push through the emotions and ignore the signals, I could push through my loneliness. I could pretend I'm not lonely. I could distract myself from it. I could push past my sadness or my frustration or my anger or my disappointment or whatever. I could push through all of those and just sort of try to put them to one side. But we know from research that when somebody continually, and this has also been my clinical experience as a relationship counsellor, that when somebody continually pushes aside their emotions, they're actually at increased risk for anxiety or depression, because they're not getting their needs met. They're not getting the needs met underneath the emotions that are helping them to cope and then to thrive, really. So your needs, getting your needs met helps you to do that. And the final thing is, you also bond through your emotions. You bond at a deeper level with people through your emotions, to your partner, to yourself, your partner, other parents, your own parents, friends. It's when we share those deeper emotions and we allow other people to share their emotions with us, that we create really, really strong, deep, wide bonds that really are the basis for community and for emotional well-being and for family. So I encourage you to think about that. And here's some questions for you to ponder. How comfortable are you with experiencing and expressing your own emotions? If you're like me, you weren't. How comfortable are you with your partner's emotions? How comfortable are they with their own? And what difference would it make if you could both express yourselves safely and openly to each other? And I know that this is a massive challenge for most couples, so I've actually created some intimate communication guidelines on my website at ellietaylor.com. So the previous steps I found affected couples mainly in the first few days, weeks, and months of parenthood. But the next few steps can affect couples and families for the next few years. So if you're still in the early stages, you've got plenty of time now to work with the steps that I'm going to talk to you about, and even go back and redress some of the steps that we've been through. You can go back and you can revisit some of those and do some healing maybe around some of the steps that you might now be recognizing you skipped or didn't know about. You probably didn't. So stage 6 is identity and self-esteem, and this is a really big one. I experienced this both personally, I've experienced it clinically with my couples, and it also showed up in the research that a partner's attitude towards us as a new mother or a new father really affects our self-esteem. And also that becoming a mother or becoming a father can affect a person's sense of identity. If we don't recognize this, if we're not sensitive of it in our partner, we can inadvertently negatively affect their self-esteem and how they feel about each other, how confident they become as a parent. So I think it's really, really important for couples to be aware that their partner's new parent self-esteem really is in their hands, and that becoming a parent might affect their sense of who they are as a person, and that can mean big things for them as an individual and also have an impact on their partnership. I'll give you a couple of examples. I've had quite a few clients who had a particular profession or vocation in their pre-baby life, but once they became a parent, that vocation no longer became meaningful to them, or it didn't feel right anymore. They wanted to do something in the world that made the world a better place for the children that they were going to have. And for some of them, that meant dropping in income or moving to a different state. These are the sorts of changes that parenthood might mean for some parents that parents are often absolutely blindsided by. I know that I was. So my step 6 then, you can probably guess, is to welcome your parent self and your partners. And I tell parents that, change is normal. More than you realize, you will be going through changes at a whole bunch of levels, and to take the time to pause and reflect on the changes and to share them with each other. This step is the step to develop another new parent type of communication style, and it's one that's deeper, more meaningful, more intimate, and the guidelines are on ellitaylor.com. It's where we kind of go deep inside. This is the inside adventure of parenthood, and parenthood is as much an inside adventure as it is an outward one and a couple's adventure. So this is the step where we go inside and we reflect on what's been going on for us in this time, or what's going on for us now, and how that might affect how we feel about ourselves or our lives, or that we're aware that we might want to make some different choices or some different plans or have some new priorities. Again, go back to being learners. Don't expect to have it all figured out. Stuff up, make mistakes. That's okay. Give yourself room to grow and allow yourselves to be learners. And encourage and support each other as you grow. Make room for growth. Expect that growth, is chaotic at times, and then at times it sort of consolidates and it's smoother sailing. So much of parenthood is a steep learning curve, and so allow for that. And so I thought, with that in mind, I might walk you through a short experiential exercise, just so that you can get some sense of the capacity that you might have for growth. So what I'll do is invite you to actually close your eyes for a moment and get a sense about how you feel about yourself. Is there a size? Is it a big feeling? Is it a smaller feeling? Is there a particular shape to the feeling that you have about yourself? A particular colour or texture? There might even be an image that comes to mind that represents that sense of yourself. When you have it, I want you then to think about your partner. How does that image change? Does it grow? Does it shrink? Does it change in colour? Is it cooler or warmer? Is there an image that comes to mind to represent how you feel about your partner? And now I want to invite you to think about your best friend. What happens? What changes? How is that image different from the other two? When you've got your 3 senses for yourself, your partner, and your best friend, I want you to come back to me. And I invite you to think about where there might be opportunities for growth. Who might be needing some more love and attention and nurturing? And some ways that you might be able to do this. Because the chances are that where it's shrunk, you might feel less connected with that person. It might be with yourself, it might be with your partner, you might be cranky with your best friend. But where there's growth, where there's expansion, there's also more capacity for connection. And so I just invite you to think about how you might want to fill that space, or just be aware that that space exists. And so there might be some more potential for you to grow in some of those areas. Okay, so now we're at stage 7. You may or may not be shocked to find that a whopping 92% of parents report increased conflict in their first year after baby. You might be relieved to hear that because you might be one of them. I certainly was. I want you to know that that's absolutely normal. That in the first few days and weeks, it's often due to sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation does horrible things to us. Now you know why it's a form of torture in some countries if you've been through it. If you haven't, prepare for it. It does last. It does pass. Sorry. And there's plenty of help out there as well. But then it's often because we might have differences in parenting styles. We might think that, we might want to parent our child one way and our partner might want to parent our child another way. And we just bump up against each other through that. So if you've had more disagreements, more arguments since you've had your children, you're absolutely not alone. You're absolutely normal. It's common. And don't freak out about it. If you freak out about it, that tends to escalate the conflict and make it worse. So just know that you're in good company. So step 7 then is to know how to grow together through your differences, because differences in and of themselves aren't bad for a couple. All couples fight about the same things. We all fight about finances, how to discipline or parent the children, whichever in-law we don't particularly get on with well, sex or not enough sex, housework. They're the top 5 for all couples. So, but some couples manage those issues and some couples, become divided through them. There's a saying that conflict is growth trying to happen, and that is so true in early parenthood. Manage your stress levels. If we manage our stress levels, we're much likely to have conflict escalate. We might not be able to avoid it altogether, but it's much less likely to escalate. Don't blame each other. You probably now have an appreciation of what you've been through as individuals and as a couple, and may have been blaming your partner or even your ex-partner for some of that. You were not prepared, probably. Most couples are not anywhere near adequately prepared for the parenthood adventure, and this is the fallout from it. So please don't blame your partner. Please don't blame yourself. Blame is a natural coping mechanism. Whenever we feel overwhelmed or under pressure, often we look for somebody to blame because that's a way of coping, but it can just cause a whole bunch of other problems. So please try to avoid that. Take time out. Parenthood is 24/7 and nothing 24/7 is sustainable. So regular time out, something that you enjoy, that helps you to relax, that's fun, that's great stress relief, once a week, something that's a little bit longer once a fortnight, and something that's a little bit longer once a month. So, plan some nice things for yourself and for your partnership if you have a partner, and find common ground. Now, the common ground is that your relationship with your partner, or even with your ex-partner, is more important to your child than any one issue that might come between you. Kids don't have an appreciation of the issues. They don't really care about the issues, but what they do care about is that that their mum and dad get on. to some degree. That might not be possible at the moment, depending on where you're at if you're a separated parent, but it's certainly something to aim for in the future. And hopefully, if you can reflect on some of what I'm talking about, that might give you some new perspective and some new reflections and some new awareness to be able to do that going forward. So, have you experienced more conflict with your partner? I'm guessing that you probably have. You may have thought that meant that there was something wrong with you or your partner or your relationship. And if conflict is growth trying to happen, what if you could give each other more support and room to grow? And so we've come to our final stage. And what I found was that if couples didn't know, weren't able to, or didn't have enough support through the previous stages, they could become, or they were at risk for becoming increasingly disconnected with each other. And in fact, this is true for 67% of couples actually report decreased relationship satisfaction in the first 3 years after baby. So again, if this is you, don't panic. It's normal. I experienced it with my partner. A lot of couples do experience it. It's because they're not prepared, they're not supported, they're not guided through all this stuff. And nobody talks about this stuff, as you are probably realizing now, which is why this Parenting as a Hero's journey is so exciting, because we are talking about this stuff. We're lifting the lid off. We're all in the same soup, and parents need to know that. It's impacting on their mental health and their marriages, not knowing this. So that's, gets me so excited to think about this. So disconnection can happen, it can creep in, and it can happen at a whole bunch of levels. You can stop just talking to your partner. You can stop sharing what's going on in your day and stop asking them about their day. So that kind of intellectual disconnection can lead to not sharing deeper thoughts and feelings with them. It can lead to us not being affectionate and not asking for affection, which can lead to us not, wanting to be intimate with our partners, which can lead to a reduced sex drive, which can then sort of start a whole other cycle. So, it can kind of be insidious. It can kind of creep in, which is why it's even more important to be aware of it. So again, you probably guessed what my step 8 is. It's to stay connected and to know how to reconnect with our partner when we've become disconnected. Relationships are all about becoming disconnected and reconnecting, becoming disconnected and reconnecting. Life's going to throw stuff at us that we've got no control over that can cause us to become disconnected. But the trick is to know how to reconnect when we have become disconnected, and to know how to reach out to each other. So if you're at this stage now, reserve time, focus, and energy for your partner. Check in with them throughout the day, text message, phone call, email, whatever. Check in regularly with how they're going. And it just has to be a simple, how are you? How are you going? How was your day? It's just making that, good quality, concentrated effort to connect that shows that you care. It doesn't have to be date night. Date night's often too hard to organise, and parents are too tired and they end up talking about the kids anyway. 5 minutes, 2 minutes of eye contact. Well, that's actually quite a long time for eye contact. A couple of seconds of eye contact just to notice what your parents' facial expression is. It's in the moment sort of stuff. Reach out to your partner when you've got stuff going on inside of you, or if you can see that they're struggling, and share what's going on in you and invite them to share in return. As I said, parenthood is as much an inside adventure as an outside one. So stay connected through the adventure, hold hands through the adventure. And you know what? This is where it just becomes so much easier from here on in. If it's kind of like you've made it to the top when you can stay connected despite your differences. It's kind of like conflict is the mountain that we all have to climb. If we can find the common ground, we can climb the mountain, and then knowing how to stay connected through the differences is when we've made it to the peak of our parenthood experience. And this is what makes the adventure so much less stressful, so much more enjoyable, and so much more rewarding from here on in, is if we are staying connected through it and sharing the journey, holding hands on that roller coaster. I'm happy to say that that was my experience. We have nearly 3 teenagers now, and it's been pretty much a breeze for us because we've done so much work to get to this point. But we are very connected through our parenting teens experience, and it's good. So I'll invite you to think. I've got an exercise for you, and what I want you to do is think of an issue you might have or a situation that you might have, and I want to invite you to think of it in terms of connection or disconnection, in terms of closeness or distance. So think of something that your partner does that irritates you, for example, maybe something little to start off with. And think of when they say or do whatever it is, you feel, and then think of the number of steps that you feel more away from them, for more distant from them. You might even want to have this conversation with them. If you're both doing this presentation together, that's perfect. So it would be when you say, you're too busy, whatever, I feel 3 steps more away from you, or I feel 10 steps more away from you. And that can lead to disconnection. And it might be really surprising, it might be really eye-opening to hear from your partner, or to disclose to your partner that something that they do has such an impact. Or you might even think that something that has a big impact doesn't have such a big impact. And that could be really helpful information as well. And then I invite you to think of a thing that your partner says or does that affects you positively in terms of you feeling close to them. So again, when you say or do something, I feel this many steps closer to you. And this leads to connection. And I want you to share this second one with your partner. You might get some new clues, some new ideas on how you can feel more connected. So that's it. That's my 8 steps of parenthood. That's, in a nutshell, 15 years of working with couples, new parents, reviewing the research. I'm a total research geek. I love research. Reading dozens and dozens and dozens of books and going through it ourselves. We have 3 children now, and that's been my experience in all those areas, that parenthood is an adventure. You will discover things you've never experienced before, and you'll face things you've never faced. It really is a journey for heroes. So embrace the journey and each other. If you would like to know more about the 8 steps of parenthood and my work, I invite you to explore my world at ellietaylor.com. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope it's been helpful and useful for you on your parenthood adventure.